theyeshiva.net.
And now, without further ado, we're honored to have our next speaker. I remember when I was I was a guest Rav in a shul in Los Angeles. They told me they wanted this very fine Talmid Chacham to be the Rav. He happened to be a Rizig Talmid Chacham, tremendous Talmid Chacham, but they said he doesn't know how to speak. I said it's much easier to find a Talmid Chacham and teach him how to speak than to find someone who knows how to speak to be a Talmid Chacham. In our case, Baruch Hashem, we have both. And it's a great honor to have Rabbi Jacobson, who flew down to honor us with Divrei Chizuk in Torah. Without further ado, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everybody. Berushus the Rabbanim, the Dayanim, the Rosh Yeshivas, and all of you who are here today. At this event, I'm reminded of an old anecdote they tell about a very poor man who was starving. So he comes to the home of an extremely wealthy Jew who was also quite stingy, knocks on the door, and he begs him for some food. The man says, I don't feed schnorrers and losers like you. You can go to the shtibel, you can go to what they used to call the hektish shtibel, you can go to shul, go to a simcha. I don't do these things. The man says, I can't go anywhere. I haven't eaten in 2 days. I'm going to collapse. Give me anything. Give me from your garbage, leftovers from Shabbos. He says, that I can do. And he takes out a piece of fish. I won't describe to you because of kavod habriyos, the smell, the texture, and the color of the fish. And he gives it to the man. The poor man was so hungry. Within 9 seconds, it was down his esophagus, but the piece of fish was so horrible, salty, and despicable, he fainted. No, he's taken to the hospital. The wealthy man comes home at night and he tells his wife, I have to go do a big mitzvah. She says, what's the problem? What happened? He says, we had a guest today. I gave him a piece of fish, nebach. He didn't take well to it. He's in the hospital. There's a big mitzvah, bikur cholim. I'm going to go visit him. Gewaldig. The next day he comes home, he tells his wife, it's a busy day today. Our guest, who I went to visit yesterday, unfortunately he passed away. There's going to be a levaya. I don't know how many people are going to go, but I have to go be mekayim the mitzvah of halvayas hameis. Beautiful. Next day he tells his wife, I'm not coming home tonight. The guy left a yosem, sitting shiva, I have to go do the mitzvah of nichem avelim. Okay? He comes home from the shiva call, and he's smiling from ear to ear. His wife never saw him in such a good mood in 25 years of marriage. So she says, Yankel, l'simcha mazu, what are you so excited about? I mean, you're coming from a nebuch from a shiva house. What's this joy? And he responds, and you forgive me, I have to say this in Yiddish, and then I'll translate into English. He says, how can I not be besimcha? Gib a cook, wiffel mitzvahs ich hab abgetan mit ein verstunkener Stickel fish. How can I not be excited? See how many mitzvahs I observed, I committed through one smelly, decadent, salty piece of fish. 4 of the greatest mitzvahs. Hachnasas archim, bikur chaylim, halvayas hameis, and nichum avelim. Where does one in life get a better deal than this for a salty, horrific piece of fish? I think this is maybe a dramatic illustration of what the Ramban famously says in the beginning of Parshas Kedoshim, that the commandment of Kedoshim to you is a commandment against concerning the person who is religious, very religious, but vulgar, or in the Ramban's inimitable expression that you all know, novel, birishus ha-Torah, a degenerate with the permission of Torah. A person once asked me, he had a kollel in Borough Park, and he asked me a question. What do you want to know? It's very hard, unlike this kollel. Usually when you go into a kollel in Borough Park or similar neighborhoods, it's very hard to find a combination of everything. If there's coffee, there's no milk. If there's milk, there's no cups. If there's cups, there's no sugar. If there's sugar, there's no hot water. If there's hot water, there's no coffee. It's very hard to find all of the pieces of chess coming together, at least in Brooklyn. And this Rosh Kolel would give a shiur till 2 o'clock, and then he needed his coffee. For him, the coffee was mamash survival, pikuach nefesh. But there was never milk. By 2 o'clock, there was no milk. So he brought a bottle of milk from his house, and he puts it there for his coffee. Of course, he finishes the shiur. He comes to the bottle of milk, and it's empty. So what does he do? The next day, he puts on the bottle of milk a little zettel, a little note. Lashem ha'aretz umloya, bakbuk zeh shayich leploini almoini. This bottle belongs to so-and-so. He finishes the shiur, the bottle is empty. They used it. What's next? He gets a little more aggressive. Yeah? He puts a big note, loi signov. The milk is empty. It's been used. The next day, he already puts on a whole macha. Loi signov is one of the Aseres HaDibros. Okay, actually, that's going of nefashis. It had to be loi signovu. But whatever he wrote there, it's an isser chamor. He's not moichel. This is a crime against Torah. A long macha. He comes 2 o'clock. There's no milk. There's no milk. So somebody gave him a piece of advice. The next day he put a note, Cholov Stam. The milk was untouched. So he wanted to understand, what's the logic of this? What's the logic? Loi signoiva didn't work. But Cholov Stam worked. It's quite telling. In contrast, I was a little while ago in Pittsburgh. I was davening in shul, one of the shuls there. And a Jew, an Erlich Yid, his name is Reb Meir Goldwasser, comes over to me. He said, I want to share with you an experience. He was learning in Telz as a bocher, and he had a shaila in halacha. And then from Telz, and he would ask Reb Moshe Feinstein Zatzal his shailas. He moved to Eretz Yisrael, Telzton in Eretz Yisrael. And he had a shaila one day, and Reb Moshe was very accessible. You could call, he answered. He has an apartment in the Lower East Side of Manhattan, close to Mesivta Tiferes Yerushalayim, his yeshiva. And he called from Eretz Yisrael, Reb Moshe, to ask his shaila in halacha. After Reb Moshe answers, he picks up the call, he says, hello. And he realizes that in Eretz Yisrael, it was in the morning. He forgot about the change of time between Chutzlah, between New York and Israel. And in New York, it was the middle of the night. He heard from Reb Moshe's hello that he woke him up in the middle of the sleep. I think he said it was 2 in the morning or 3 in the morning. So he apologized. He says, oh, I'm so sorry. And he said, no. You called, it's fine. But I need a few minutes. Give me a few minutes, and then I'll take the call. And he waited on the call, and then he understood. Had to wash his hands and say Berchas HaTorah, etc. And he comes back, he apologizes for the delay, it was like 6-7 minutes. He takes his shaila, he listens to it, and he responds. When he finishes responding, Reb Moshe tells this bocher, Reb Meir, he says, what is your address? So he was wondering why he would need his address, but he thought that maybe Reb Moshe had a minhag to write down his tshuvas. He often wrote his tshuvas, as we know, and perhaps he mails it to the questionnaire for him to have a copy of the tshuva. That was his hashara, his estimation. So he gives Reb Moshe his address. Reb Moshe takes down the address. He thanks him. He hangs up the phone. He feels bad for waking up the Rosh Hashiva in the middle of the night, but I guess he got over that at some point. A few weeks later, he tells me he gets a letter from Reb Moshe Feinstein. He opens up the envelope, there's a check inside. And he writes to him a little note. He said, I made you wait on a telephone call from Eretz Yisrael to America. I couldn't answer right away because I had to say some brachas and wash my face before because I was sleeping. But you waited, so I found out from the telephone company what the charge for that was. And since it's my responsibility, so therefore I'm sending you the money for that. And when I heard that, I remembered something that I think is not just applicable today, but it's applicable for all of life. The Gemara tells a story in Masechta Shabbos, Daf Nun Hey Amud Aleph. It's a fascinating and incredible story, but it's one of those stories that leaves you hanging because there's no resolution to the story. And the Gemara says that Rabbi Yehuda was sitting in front of his Rebbe, Shmuel. Shmuel, of course, was considered one of the greatest of the Chazal, one of the greatest Talmudic sages of his day. Not just a great sage and leader and dayan and Talmud Chacham, of course, but also a great physician and a great astronomer. Nehirin li shvila de rakia keshvila de naharda, he said. And Shmuel was sitting in his bezdin, and Rabbi Yehuda, his student, was sitting in his presence. Asa Isisa, a woman came in and started to scream. Which happens in many Jewish communities. Somebody comes in and starts screaming at the rabbi. She's screaming, tzavcha, she's hollering about this, about that. You can imagine what it was. V'loy ashgich ba. And Shmuel ignored her, he didn't respond. So Rabbi Yehuda turns to Shmuel and he says, Loy saver leimar, did the master, Shmuel, forget the pasuk? Oitem oznoi miza'ak asdal, gam hu yikra v'lo yana. Shlomo HaMelech says in Mishlei, in Proverbs, somebody who becomes deaf, he plugs his ear to the cry of a poor person. When he calls out, he also won't be listened to. Did you forget this pasuk? What do you think is Shmuel's response? His Talmud confronts his Rebbe and says, I don't understand. There's a woman screaming. She's in pain. She's anxious. She's poor, whether physically, financially, or emotionally. And you're just not saying anything. And she's screaming. So Shmuel's response is these words. Reishcha bekriri. Reishcha de reishcha b'chamimi. Your leader, your head, your teacher, me, I'm going to be penalized with cold water. But your teacher's teacher, my boss, he's going to be scolded in hot water. Mar Ukva is the Av Bezdin here. Go to him. Shmuel says, I'm not the boss. I'm your teacher. But I also have a boss. Mar Ukva was one of the most respected leaders and teachers of the time, also extremely wealthy and successful person. The famous Gemara about his tzavah, what he left for tzedakah at the end of his life. He says, Marukva is the Av Bezdin. He's the leader of the Bezdin. He's here. What's Vilsta Famir? I don't set policy here. I may be punished with cold water, but the hot water is Reishcha de Reishcha, is your teacher's teacher. End of story. And that's it. The Gemara moves on. And I ask you today, what is this? Shmuel is confronted by Rabbi Yehuda. He says, what do you want from me? Go to Marukva. Very often people say that. This is a question that is a very common question. You're working, lahavdil, but you're working in a company or a corporation. You see certain things. I'm not the boss. Somebody is screaming, there's injustice. I'm not the boss, there's another boss. Was Shmuel right? Was Shmuel not right? We don't know. But we do know. The famous expression of Yerushalmi, Divrei Torah aniyim b'makam echad v'ashirim b'makam acher. Torah is a mosaic, a tapestry. In Maseches Baba Basra, Daf Yud, Amud Beis, there's another story about a man named Yosef, the son of Rabbi Yeshua, who fell ill, and he came to what we call today a near death or a clinical death experience. And when he emerged from his illness, he tells his father, Rabbi Yosef, tells his father, Rabbi Yeshua, about his vision of the higher world of Olam HaEmes. And he uses the famous expression, Olam Hafuch Ra'isi. I saw a upside down world. El Yoinim Lamata, Tachtoinim Lamayla. Those who down here were the big machers. They were the feinschmeckers. Over there, the Yippas weren't so prominent. Those who were downtrodden here, over there, they were raised to great prominence. So his father says, Lo olam hafach reisa, olam baru reisa. You saw a clear world. Here it's a Meshuggah. It's a sane world. There was once a yeshiva bach who told Reb Chatzkel Abramsky Zatzal, who was the author of Chazoin Yecheskel on Tosefta. And Tosefta is one of things that are not learned so much. The brises at the end of the Gemara, they're printed usually in the back of the Gemaras. So he tells Reb Chatzkel, he says, Sada, a farvorfene Tosefta. How do we say farvorfen in English? I don't know. Obscure. There's an obscure Tosefta. His response is going to work in Yiddish. He said, Nee. The Tosefta is nicht verworfen. Du bist verworfen. You're lost. The Tosefta is not lost. You're lost. And Olam Baru Reisa, you saw a good world. We see a Meshuggah world. What you saw was real. Comes Tosfos, and this is an unusual Tosfos. And Tosfos writes him of Abasha. Pirish Rabbeinu Chananel. Rabbeinu Chananel explained the story, and he heard it. B'shem ha'go'oinim shekabola biyodam rav mipi rav. This is verbatim what Tosfos says. The Go'oinim said they have a tradition, Rebbe from Rebbe, all the way back, that what Rabbi Yosef saw in heaven when he had the near-death experience was Shmuel sitting in the presence of Rabbi Yehuda the teacher, and Shmuel the disciple, the pupil. Why? Because Shmuel learned one thing from Rabbi Yehuda, that when an old lady comes in screaming about injustice, you don't ignore it. You have to respond. You have to embrace the situation. So in that world, Shmuel was the Rebbe, and he would say, Shinene, sharp one, keen one, as he said there too. That was the expression in Shas, Shinene. But here was the other way around. Rabbi Yehuda is the Rebbe, and Shmuel is the student. That's the Olam Hafach. This is what the Go'onim received. Rav mipi Rav. Tosfos quotes Rabbeinu Chananel. But I want to ask you a question. Why is that the Olam Barer? How much did Rabbi Yehuda learn from Shmuel? You go through Shas and you know. Rabbi Yehuda learned most of his Torah from Shmuel. Most of his Torah he learned from Shmuel. Where's justice? This is an Olam Barer. He said one comment to Shmuel, quoting a pasuk from Mishlei. No chidushim. He didn't even give a direi in Mishlei. He didn't even talking about a direi. Yeah? Talking about it. You know what a direi is? You have direyas in Miami. Where I come from, there's a lot of direyas. A direya means, how do you say it nicely? A swindler in Yiddish was called a direya. So I once asked a person, I met him once, and I said, why are you involved in all these things? You should know better. He tells me I follow the pasuk in Parshas Mishpatim. So what's the It says, V'im shlosh eile lo yasela, v'yotza chinam ein kosef. He came from a Hungarian, Galiciano origin, so it was a different type of Yiddish. So shlosh, the Yiddish that I come from, Lithuanian, Russian Yiddish, we say dirai. Dirai, they also say dirai. Dirai, yeah, means three. But in certain pronunciations of Yiddish, dirai meint a dirai means dishonesty, a swindler. It says, V'im shlosh eile lo yasela. Am Yiddish can dirai v'yotza chinam ein kosef. You go out broke without any money. That's what I have learned in my life. This was his policy, this was his philosophy, and he had noch a pasuk. He had noch a pasuk in Parshas Mishpatim about an Amma Ivriya, how you have to dirai situations. Okay? This was his policy, no? So now I ask you, Shmuel heard a pasuk. Shmuel knew Mishlei. But Rabbi Yehuda said, Rebbe, there's a pasuk in Mishlei, and he quotes the pasuk. No additions, no explanations, doesn't bring no mefarshim. And because of that, Shmuel now becomes a student. How do you explain this? This is Olam Barer? This is the clear world? And one of the answers for this is, based on another Gemara in Masechta Shabbos that everybody knows, that when the non-Daf Lamed Aleph, that when the non-Jew comes to Hillel and says, teach me the whole Torah, standing on one foot, on one leg, which is basically 40 seconds, I want to know all of Judaism, Shammai has no patience. Dachvei b'mas habinyan. And Hillel says, Madalach sani lechavrach loisavit zui kol ha-Torah kula v'idach pirushu zil gemor. The whole Torah is don't do to somebody else what you don't like to be done to you. Thus is Torah. Everything else is commentary on this. Now go learn the Mefarshim. What is Hillel saying? Hillel says that if I'm learning Daf Yomi Mesechtes Vachim, if I'm trying to figure out the difference of an Asham and a Chatos, if I'm trying to figure out the difference of Bila and Kmitza, if I'm learning about Mavoi, Lechi, or Kaira, or if I'm learning Baba Kama, Baba Mitzia, Baba Basra, Shersha, Naga, Choyisha, and Armala, really what I'm learning about is sensitivity to another person. It's all Tosfos and Rashi on Avos Yisrael. The Chidushei Harim asks a question. Why couldn't Hillel just say the positive? The Marsha asks the question. Just say, V'ahavta l'recha kamoicha, zeh kol ha-Torah kula. So there's different answers. The Chidushei Harim says this person was not Jewish yet. The derher of V'ahavta l'recha kamoicha is very deep. Love somebody else like yourself. The Ramban himself struggles with this. He says, how could it be? He says he wasn't capable of understanding V'ahavta l'recha kamoicha. What he was capable of understanding is, don't treat somebody differently than you would like to be treated. You don't want to be lied to. You don't want to be deceived to. You don't want to be cheated. You don't want to be backstabbed. You don't want a dagger in your back or your chest. Don't do it to somebody else, physically or psychologically. Zeh kol ha-Torah kula. If that's the case, Shmuel taught Rabbi Yehuda for years, for decades, the commentary of Torah. But Rabbi Yehuda Kevayachal communicated to his Rebbe Shmuel the core of Torah. Kol ha-Torah kula. So I could be a Lamdan and know Bavli and Yerushalmi and Nachrishonim and Acharonim and Rambam, but I just know the commentary. It's like somebody who learns a sugya, and it happens sometimes in yeshivas. They know the Tosfos, but they don't know the Gemara. Which of course you can't know Tosfos if you don't know the Gemara. But there are such situations. We sit by Shiurim. Shiurim are about Shef Shmaitzes, Ktsoses, Birchas Shmuels, Reb Chaim's, Brisker Ravs. But some people don't know how to read the Mishnah and the Gemara. Sometimes, in a more dramatic sense, we sometimes know the whole commentary of Torah. We know every pshetel. We know hundreds of vertlach, ideas, sugyas, halachas. But I don't know the Torah itself. Hillel says, Zehu kol ha-Torah kula. This is the Torah. V'idach pirushu zil gemoir. You know, there's an interesting question that Tosfos asks. The Gemara says, also in Shabbos, Lamed Aleph, Omar Rava. Everybody knows, when a person comes to the Bezdin Shalmaila, they ask a few questions. What's the first question? Nasasa v'nasata be'emuna. Did you engage in business interactions faithfully, with trust, honestly? And then, kavati itim l'Torah, sakta b'pirya v'rivya, tzipisa l'Yeshua, afilu hachi yiris Hashem oitzra ini loy loy. Asks Tosfos in two places, Kiddushin daf mem and Sanhedrin daf zayin. Reb Hamnuna said, Ein tchilas dinoi shel adam elal divrei Torah. Rava and Reb Hamnuna contradict each other. Rava says the first question is about what's going on in business. Reb Hamnuna says the first din is Torah. Gewaldige question. What does Tosfos answer? The first payment, the first penalty comes for Torah, but the first question is business. But he doesn't explain why. Hagufa kasha. If they first take account of what's happening with Torah, so why is that not the first question? So the Mefarshim struggle with this. There's a Marsham, a Tabach, other Pirushim. But I once saw the author of Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, Shlomo Gansfried, wrote a sefer from Parshas HaShavua. It's called a period. In Parshas V'Eschanan, he explains Tosfos as follows. He says, Nasasa v'nasata be'emuna is a question as a hakdama to kavati itim l'Torah. It's a din in the question of Torah. Of course it starts with Torah. They want to know Torah, but the first question is going to be Nasasa v'nasata be'emuna. Why? Because when a person is dishonest, or when a person is not fully scrupulous and ethical, when it comes to Choshen Mishpat, the motto of this morning here, then this person disgraces the Torah. So their learning of Torah becomes, instead of a source of pride, it becomes a source of disgrace. As the famous Rambam in Hilchos Yesodei HaTorah Perek Hey, when he describes Kiddush Hashem in a free society, from the Gemara, from the Chazal, somebody that you masoyu matone be'emunah, and you say, wow, I want to learn from this person, I want to be like this person. So the nasasav and nasata be'emunah is the first question, because without that, the Torah is nishkin Torah. Nasis loya, as the Gemara says in Yuma, sometimes the Torah itself could be nasis loy sam hamavos, because it didn't touch the person. It didn't refine my character. It didn't turn me into an ethical person. So an old chassidische taich, ein kiddush ela b'makom suda. We all know Shabbos, we have to do kiddush in the place of the meal. So if I do kiddush in shul, and then I want to continue the meal at home, unless I started the meal in shul, or I do kiddush again, there's a problem. Kiddush has to be b'makom suda. So in Psachim, there's the reasons, the Rishonim, the Gemara and the Rishonim explain the reason for this. But there's also a remez, a spiritual metaphor, a spiritual hint here. Ein kiddush ela b'makom suda. In Yiddishkeit, there's no kedusha if it doesn't permeate the place of the meal. Sometimes people in shul, they close their eyes and they scream, Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh. Nekadosh is simcha ba'olam. Baruch kvoid Hashem im kaimai. My kiddush is stupendous. My learning, my davening. When I come into the office, suddenly I become an undomesticated wild beast. I come home, I insult my wife, I scream at my kids. I go to business, I sometimes lie, cheat, deceive, backstab, lashon hara, rechilas, hasagas gvul. I come to mincha, ooh, kadosh. Ein kiddush ela b'makom seuda. Yahadus doesn't recognize a kedusha that doesn't inform, enlighten, permeate, penetrate the makom seuda, the physical dynamics of a person's life, the way I treat people, the way I deal with people, the way I talk to people, the way I work on myself and I challenge my egos, my ego, my insecurity, my need to often follow a winding, crooked path rather than a straight path. That creates all the difference. That's the only kedusha that Judaism acknowledges, embraces. B'makom seuda, which of course includes my workplace, my partners, my colleagues, my employers, my employees. Some time ago I was in Detroit for a Shabbaton for Partners in Torah, and I was having lunch, and at my table was sitting somebody who's a friend and a great philanthropist and a special Jew. His name is Gary Turgo. And we were schmoozing over lunch. And he shares with me the following experience. Gary, who's a Yida ben Torah, a Baal Chesed, a special man, is the chairman of Chemical Bank in Midland, Michigan. And he's sitting in his office on the 11th floor of the bank. And a call comes in to the chairman, Mr. Turgo. On the other line, on the other side of he picks up the phone, and a man is speaking to him. He says, "Is your name Gary Turgo? Are you the chairman of the bank?" He says, "Yes." He says, "Well, let me introduce myself. I am a Jew. I live in Dublin, Ohio. And I tell you that I am embarrassed with you as a Jew. The Jewish people are embarrassed to have you as one of our people. And I know previously you were chairman of the previous bank, its predecessor, Talmar, which you named after your grandfather. Your grandfather is turning over in the grave from shame that you are his grandson." Gary tells me, I didn't expect such a shalom aleichem and a baruch haba and such beautiful compliments on a nice morning in Michigan. I say, before you go on, could you tell me what happened, what the problem is? Maybe I can help. He says, help? Help? disgusting, despicable, and it's your bank. He says, please relax and tell me what happened. Maybe I can help. So I'll tell you what happened. I'm 91 years old. My wife died not long ago. We have no children. There's nothing left after us. But 40 years ago, we built a home together. I needed $40,000 loan to build our home in Dublin, Ohio. And I took out a loan, I took out a mortgage for our home. Today the home is worth close to $1 million. I never defaulted paying a mortgage for even 1 month. For 40 years, every month I sent in my check loyally and faithfully. 8, 9 months ago, my wife died. And I got disoriented. I lost my balance, my rationality a little bit. And for a few months, I was just not taking care of basic needs. I didn't have the capability and the mental space to take care of my mail. But a few weeks ago, I opened my mail from all these months, and I saw that for the last few months, I wasn't making my payments for the mortgage. And I owed 7 payments for 7 months. So what did I do? I took a checkbook and I wrote out the full payment for all the 7 months. I explained what happened. I was disoriented. I'm sorry for delaying the payment. Here is my payment. I get a letter back from your bank. We're sorry. The home is up for foreclosure. I write back, I don't understand. I paid up these 7 months, too late, it's up for foreclosure. Because this is your bank. This is what you do to a 91-year-old Jewish widower who has nothing but his home. Gary says, please give me your address, your name, your number. Let me see what I can do. He hangs up, he goes down to the 4th floor where they deal with foreclosure. He asks the person there to put in the name. Person puts in the name. It comes up, and he says, yeah, it's up for foreclosure. Gary says, listen, could you tell me how much he owes on this entire home? With all the penalties, with all the fines, how much is owed on this home? Person looks up and says, $5,200. He says, okay, just do me a favor. Forget this foreclosure. Leave it alone. Cancel it out. It's done. He says, we can't. The mortgage was bought by a servicer. It's out of our hands. It's not ours. There's nothing we can do. Gary says, here's a check. $5,200. He writes out a check. Overnight it to the servicer who bought this mortgage. I'm taking it. You make sure it goes back. A message goes back to this Jew, this 91-year-old Jew in Dublin, and send him the news, and all is taken care of. And Gary wrote a note. Your home was paid off for completely. Forget this 7 months. Take back your check. It's fine. We're not depositing that. Fines, penalties, all covered. You owe not a penny on this home. May you enjoy this home for many long, happy, prosperous, and healthy years. Gary Turgo. And it's overnight to the servicer. All is settled. Gary says, make sure you confirm with me when it's done. Make sure the Jew gets my note and the message that the home is his. Great. Done. Life moves on. He tells me around a year later, he gets a call one day. A man introduces himself as a lawyer who practices in Dublin, Ohio. Is your name Mr. Turgo? Yes. Do you remember a Jew in Dublin by this and this name? He says, you have to remind me. He says, this is a man who almost lost his home, $5,200. He says, yeah, of course. Was it settled? Did the man get the note that everything was taken care of? He says, yes. And I'm here to tell you that this person died yesterday. And he has no family, he has no children. He says, I'm so sorry to hear. Is there anything I can do? Is everything fine? He says, yeah, there's not much you can do, but I want to tell you a few days after he got that note, he called me. And he said, we have to change the will. And he changed his will. His final will and testament he changed. And what he put in is that this home should go to Gary Turgo to distribute to any charity of his liking. So now you have a home, and tell me what you want. It's your house. How much is the house worth on the market? $850,000. Gary tells me, he says, Rabbi Jacobson, not bad. $5,200. I got an $850,000 home. Not such a bad investment deal. And the lawyer says, what do you want me to do? So Gary says, put it up. Let's get the money. And I'll distribute it to charity. The man says, great. But Gary says, I need to ask you one thing. What was his passion? If he would give it to charity, what was his passion? And he says the charities he used to give went to Israel. So Gary said, okay, take the $850,000. He split it up between 10 moizdas, holy moizdas in Israel, of Torah and tzedakah, including yeshivas and kolelim. And, as he told me before Pesach, they each got their check and the $850,000 were distributed. Before he gets off the phone, the lawyer says, Mr. Turgo, can I share a personal feeling? Sure. He says, I'm a Catholic man, a faithful Catholic man all my life. I read the Bible attentively and I know it well. I never understood, why did God make the Jews his chosen people? Why them? What did they do? Why them? As far as the Bible is concerned, they don't stop sinning. They're revolting. They're always complaining. They're chronic complainers. They appreciate nothing. And I didn't know, why did God make Jews the chosen people? He says, now I know. When I saw your behavior towards this man, now I know why you were the chosen people. That, my friends, I think represents a little bit of our calling at such a moment in history when the Jewish people have a tremendous power wherever they live to influence, not only within our own circle, but literally the world. I'm going to tell you something. I always wondered, I grew up in the home of a journalist, a pretty seasoned journalist. So journalism was part of my upbringing. And I wondered about something. The greatest community of Muslims in the United States is where, you know? Michigan, Detroit. You know which newspaper for decades would never demonize Israel? Which in America, with newspapers, the demonization of Israel is unique, and it's a machala. Syria could slaughter 300,000-400,000 people, including through chemical warfare. But the condemnations of the United Nations and the media with Israel is uniquely biased. But the Detroit Free News, which is read by millions of Muslims, was always supportive of Israel. And it was a pella by me, because usually you service your clientele, your advertisement base. You want your readers to be happy with you. And certainly in such a community, I thought the first thing would be the demonization of Israel, or at least nice bias towards Israel. There was a federal Supreme Court judge by a dinner of Beis Yehuda, the school in Detroit. And he heard Rabbi Berelwein speak at the dinner, and he was impressed. And he asked if he could come to a private dinner in his home. And they kashered the home, and Rabbi Wein came, and the Supreme Court judge brought there the Irish editor of the Detroit Free News. And in the middle of dinner, he turns to Rabbi Wein and he says, "You're a rabbi?" He says, "Yeah." "Are you Orthodox, Reform, Conservative, Reconstructionist, Renewal?" He says, "I'm Orthodox." He says, "Let me tell you about the one Orthodox rabbi I know." Rabbi Wein wants to bury himself from shame. You know when people tell you, "Let me tell you a story about the one rabbi I know." And you're like, "Oh my God, how am I going to defend this one?" You know the feeling. And he says, "I want to tell you a story. My mother was an immigrant from Ireland. She had no husband. She had one son. She came to America without a penny, and she got herself a job as a cleaning lady in the home of a rabbi in Oak Park, Michigan, in the 40s. They liked her, she liked them, they treated her with dignity, and they were going on vacation one winter at the end of December 1947. And they asked her if she wants to stay in the house. She had no home. She said, yes, she'll stay in the house. She'll look after the home. And they went on vacation. They came back from their vacation December 25th, 1947. The rabbi is driving with his wife and children. And they come by their home. And in front of their home, they see decorations galore. Santas and trees and lights. A lebedik and freilich. Kol misha lo'ira, those decorations in front of their home, lo'ira, decorations miyamav. And the rabbi innocently says, this is funny, it looks like our house, but it's not our house. He only drove here, 900,000 times, it's not our house. So he goes looking for the real house. And it dreht sich, and 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 dreht sich. And there's no home. His wife says, what are you doing? Let's go home. He said, I went home, but it's not our home. They go back. No, it's not our home. And they're looking. You know what? Let me check out this home. Maybe it is our home. And he parks and he gets out and he goes to the door. It's my home. They walk into the home and it's decorated from inside, from outside. Mebayis or mechutz. Yeah? There was once a big Rav who came to a Reformed temple in Germany, and the Rabbiner was showing him over the temple, and he said, Mamish vitevas noyach, koifer mi bayis u mi bachutz. He says, what do you mean? He says, the kfir is innewenig and oisenwenig. It's mamish. This was koifer mi bayis u mi bachutz. And he walks in, and the cleaning lady, the Irish cleaning lady, goes over to him. Says, Rabbi, I'm so sorry. Let me tell you what happened. And I feel so bad. I realize you're coming back December 25th, and you're the only home that's not decorated. And I felt so horrible that you and your children will not be able to experience the spirit and the sweetness of the holiday. But I only had $10, so I ran to the store and I bought everything I can get for $10. I think I didn't do such a bad job, but I know you'll give me more money and we'll get much more stuff, and tomorrow we'll decorate it even more. But at least I wanted you should come home to this beautiful feeling of the holiday. And the rabbi looks at this woman. His children was there. He says, could we go to another room for a moment? They go to another room. And he says, listen, I can't thank you enough for your kindness, your sensitivity, your empathy, and your thinking about us. But let me just explain to you something. If my community walks by this house and sees this, they will think one of three things. I went senile, I'm absolutely crazy, or I converted to Christianity. Whatever they think, I lose my job. Besides, I'm a Jew, and this doesn't really work for us. I really need your help. We got to take this down ASAP. She says, when? Like in a week? He says, no. Now, as an NOW, tonight, I need your help. We got to take down everything. But I will never forget your thoughtfulness towards my family. And he puts his hand in his pocket, and he takes out a $100 bill, which in 1947 was something like $5,000. And he gives it to her. And he says, this is just a small token of gratitude and appreciation for your kindness to my family. You spent $10, but I wanted to show you our love and our appreciation. Here is $100 for you. The editor of the Detroit Free Press turns to the rabbi in the home of the Supreme Court Judge of Michigan and says, that lady was my mother. Never ever did we forget how this rabbi behaved. And I want you to know, 70 years later, once a year, our family and the rabbi's family join Friday night dinner. My mother continued this tradition all her life. I continued the tradition all my life. My children continue it with the children of the grandchildren of the rabbi. He says it's true, the Shabbat dinners changed somewhat in character. Those grandchildren are a little bit on a different level of Yiddishkeit. But I want you to know that's where we go once a year to commemorate the friendship. And I want you to know one more thing. As a result of that, I made a decision that nobody is going to demonize Israel on the pages of my paper. Because what's Israel? Israel is the place where Jews live. And I know how Jews live. And since I know how Jews live, I kept a certain editorial standard in the newspaper. And I thought to myself, 6 decades later, millions and millions of people were affected positively towards Israel, towards the Jewish people, were speared. The rhetoric of hatred, bias, anti-Semitism, bigotry, racism, and discrimination for a little small country trying to defend its 7 million Jews 70 years after Hitler. But how did it happen? It happened because one rabbi treated one cleaning lady, an Irish woman, with extraordinary empathy, sensitivity, honesty, and respect, inspired by the ethical morality that every siman and seif in Choshen Mishpat, all the way from Dayanim, all the way till the end of Moiser, Malshin, Chayvel, Bechaveda, all the whole Choshen Mishpat, every siman and every seif espouses and displays and manifests in one form or another, or in the words of Hillel, Mada loch sani l'chavrach loy savid zehu kol ha-Torah kula. I'm going to conclude, my dear friends, with one final story that I personally love. I come from New York. I grew up in New York. In New York, there are some, how do I say it? I'm talking about Lashon Hara. I'm not going to start speaking about Lashon Hara about my hometown, New York. But you know, there's some, people are not always relaxed in New York. Let's put it that way. They're not always relaxed, right? Florida is a little more relaxed. Maybe it's because global warming has arrived to Florida, not to New York. Whatever the reason is, but somebody once asked me why people in New York are uptight and depressed and nervous, and I said, you would also be if the light at the end of your tunnel was New Jersey. There is a very prominent New York lawyer whose name is Ben Bronfman. And he maintains a high profile, and he's an interesting character, a chevreman, speaks his heart, speaks his truth. And one day, he was phoned by a renowned celebrity, a rap star who's known as Puff Daddy, who was involved in some ma'asim tovim, which I won't elaborate upon, some years ago. And he was being tried, and it was a serious case for him. And he calls Brafman. He says, I want you, Ben, to represent me. Money is not an issue, of course. You're the man. You're my lawyer. Ben said, okay. He says, but there's 2 conditions. Everyone who works for me, there's 2 conditions. Condition number 1, I need every telephone number of yours. Even the telephone numbers only your wife has, I get. Number 1. Number 2, you work for me 24/7. 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning. When you're a world-renowned celebrity, you're also entitled to be a meshugana. 24/7, whenever hour I call, you're available. Ben looks at him and says, the first condition is fine, I can give you all my numbers. The second condition, we have to mitigate, it's 24/6. He says, why? He says, I observe the Sabbath. I'm an observant Jew. Sabbath, there's no work. It's 24/6. He says, no. For me, it's 24/7. He says, I'm sorry, but this is God's day that he gave the Jewish people. There's no exceptions. It's nothing personal. I don't do this for anybody ever. I don't take cell phones. I don't look at the phone. I don't do faxes, no emails, no texting, no WhatsApp. Garnish. He didn't use the word garnish. Nada. Brafman says, you got to make an exception. I can't work with somebody if it's not 24/7. He says, get another lawyer. He says, I want you. He says, if you want me, it's 24/6. He says, no, I want you 24/7. Called chutzpah. He says, it's either me or somebody else, but if it's me, it's 24/6. So poor Puff Daddy says, okay, 24/6. But what if it's an emergency? So he says, no problem. I have a fax machine at home. Send the fax. I'll read it. If it's a real emergency, I'll make sure they get back to you. He says, but how are you going to know it's an emergency? You have to pick up your phone. He says, explain it in the fax. He says, no. Okay, I want you, I'm taking you. This was the middle of the week. Friday night, Ben sits down to make Kiddush. Or stands up to make Kiddush. Shalom Aleichem. Eishes Chayil, picks up his cup, Yoim HaShishi Vaychul HaShamayim, his wife, his children, his Eineklach around the table, and suddenly the phone rings. He has a hunch. It's Puff Daddy Friday night calling him. It rings twice, it rings 3 times. Okay. He ignores, he's middle of Kiddush. Finishes Kiddush, they wash, it's ringing. It rings 10 times, it rings 20 times. One of his children counts. It rings 1,000 times. Now you understand the patience that it takes, right? To ring today, in today's day, to have a phone ring, I mean, you could just put it down and let it ring, or have one of your 900 servants hold the phone for you. 1,000 times it rang. Needless to say, Ben did not pick up the phone. But at this point, he knew it was Puff Daddy. It was not a hunch anymore, and Ruach HaKodesh was unnecessary. Motzei Shabbos, after Ma'ariv and Havdalah, he calls up Puff Daddy. He says, "Hi, it's Ben Brafman." He says, "Yeah, how you doing? I have a question. Did you call me Friday night?" He says, "Absolutely yes." He says, "You don't think that after 5 rings, when somebody doesn't answer, you just hang up?" He says, "I had to call you." He says, 1,000 times? He says, "Absolutely." Ben says, "Listen, I'm so sorry, but I told you, I work 24/6. I cannot answer a phone on Sabbath. Was it an emergency?" He says, "Absolutely not." "So why'd you call me 1,000 times?" "That's what I did." He says, "Well, I apologize, but I can't do it now. I can't do it in the future. Saturday night, I can call you. Just remember that. And I'm so sorry, because I know you called 1,000 times." He said, "Why are you sorry? I just made money because of you." He says, "What are you talking about?" He said, "I made a bet with my guys that I'm going to call, and you're not going to pick up." And they said, "For sure he's going to pick up. 1,000 calls, the money he's getting for you in a week could support him, his children, his grandchildren. He's going to pick up the phone." And I said, no, you don't know these Jews. You don't know these Jews. He's not going to. And we made a bet for $10,000. And he said, "You didn't pick up the phone, and I got a fast $10,000. No complaining." The impact that a Jew who has real principles, who lives with the Ribono Shel Olam, who knows that Liya Kesef v'Liya Zov Ne'um Hashem Tzvakos, is a different life, and a different impact, and a different influence. And today is one of the first generations in history where we have that ability, l'sakin oilam, b'malchus shin daled yud. I have to tell you, as chatoy, I don't know, as animasker hayom, something happened. I needed a ticket to go somewhere, and it was a very expensive ticket. So I called a friend who deals with tickets, and I asked him if there was an organization bringing me, and they couldn't get a ticket. It was hard. So I called a friend, and he tells me, "I'll get you the ticket. I'll get you the ticket for $1,400, business class ticket, all good." I say, "Okay, wonderful." He says, "Who's paying?" I said, "They'll pay for the ticket." He says, No, let's not be stupid. Such a ticket is $2,500. I got it for $1,400 because of my connections. You charge them $2,500. I say, "If you can get it for $1,400, what do we have to do?" He says, No, it's for you. I'm not taking the money. This is how you make fast money, Rabbi Jacobson, in America. It's nothing. They want you. I said, "Yeah." "They're paying the ticket?" "Yeah." "Will they pay?" I said, "Perhaps." He said, "So they'll pay $2,500 just because you have a friend and you're getting it cheap. It's not your problem, and you don't have to lose money. And this is how you make a fast, $1,100. I'm like, this doesn't feel right, and it doesn't only feel right, it's not right. What am I going to lie and say I paid $2,500 when I paid $1,400? He says, "You're not made for money." I'm like, don't write me off like this. But he said, "I'm giving you an opportunity to make a nice couple of dollars with yosher." With joy. You're not stealing. You're not lying. I said, "Really? I'm not lying?" Well, no, you're telling them the price of a ticket. You have connections. And he starts preaching to me how this is the normal way, and this is how you should do it, and this is, And you know what? I have to tell you, he was such a good salesman. Yeah? He almost persuaded me. He almost convinced me. He's like, just tell them, don't lie, tell them the regular price. You have a favor. I said, you know what? I just don't feel this is the way to make money. So I called them, and they said, how much was the ticket? I said, $1,400. They said, okay, great. And at that moment, even though I didn't have a real doubt before, but there was a certain menuchas hanefesh that I experienced that I couldn't have experienced otherwise. Besides it being the right thing, not the wrong thing. Besides all of the chshoshes and the isurim connected to Choshen Mishpat, I'm talking from a psychological point of view. The serenity and the clarity that a person who follows Shulchan Aruch without dreidlach has is something you can't buy today, not even in the office of the therapist. It's the Jew who lives by what God wants and can face the mirror every moment and say, I am accountable for how I live today, for how I lived yesterday. I don't lie, I don't exaggerate, I don't deceive, I don't cheat, I don't backstab, I don't front stab, I don't delay, I don't maneuver things, I don't manipulate situations to get my way at the expense of other people. I am scrupulous, I am authentic, and I am real. And remember, at the end of the day, nobody knows the truth besides you and the mirror. The person in the mirror who looks back at you. There was once a tzaddik who said in Yiddish, he said, you can't fool God. You can't fool the world all the time. Only person you could fool is yourself. Was is the kunst as a nar, nart up a nar? What's the big gedula if a fool fools a fool? But sometimes we think we fool everybody, but the person in the mirror really knows. And when you could look in the mirror and have that inner core and inner serenity, it changes a person's life. It changes a person's home. And it changes a person's children. How they respect their father and mother. When you have a child, you know about your father and mother, and you could look up to your parents, and you never hear it from them a sheker. You never heard from them a lie. Lincoln once said, if you're going to lie, you have to have a good memory. Because if you lie, you have to cover up tomorrow, yesterday's lie, and then today's lie, and then the next day you have to cover up. Those of us who don't have good memories, you don't lie, you don't need a good memory. You're honest, you're real, you're authentic. And thus I say to you in conclusion, what a privilege it is, what a moving experience it is to be part of this extraordinary enterprise of the Business Halacha Institute of Florida, the Kolel Choshen Mishpat, which is dedicated to that one cause, L'Kadesh Shem Hashem, and to inculcate into the psyche, the brain, and the soul of Klal Yisrael, of God's children, that Eirech Chaim, Yeredeya, Even Ezra, and Choshen Mishpat are one, and that the second 5 commandments of the Aseres HaDibros were given by the same God as the first 5 commandments. It was taka 2 stones. But the person who separates and says, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, yeah, Lo Yiyeh Lecha, yeah, Yehareg V'Yaver, Zocher Hashem HaShabbos L'Kadshoi, Lo Yisisa Kabed. But when it comes to the other 5, suddenly he finds every heter, every fahakta heter in the world. And suddenly that's not God. That has no room in the Jewish world. And it creates tremendous hypocrisy, tremendous damage. And I want to know how many youth are turned off when they see people who are supposedly extremely religious, but when it comes to interpersonal relationships, it becomes very, very hypocritical. And it turns a person off. Why is it? I asked somebody. I don't know if I'm right or wrong, but it's a funny thing. It comes to shidduchim, right? Or any other question. There's a Jew, daven shachas mincha ma'ir with a minyan, learns daf yomi, puts on tefillin, never misses a minyan, never misses a shir, gewaldig. comes to his office, and every day he says 300 lies. I don't know if any of us ever made a list how many white lies we say a day. It's not a bad thing to do, even before Ella. Yeah, including Avedas that the Gemara in Erkin says are shakul like a Gilei Arayah Shrichas Davam Avedas are like Lashon Hara. But this Jew is called a Frum Yid. Frum, no question. Another person, you don't see him always in shul, maybe miss a few mitzvahs, Rahman al-Islam. Never ever will hurt somebody. Ever. He's not called a Frum Jew. What happened? Half of Shulchan Aruch is divine, and half of Shulchan Aruch is not divine. How was that discrepancy created? I don't know. But I don't think it's real Judaism. And this movement to reverse that in people's minds and psyches is incredibly powerful. Techzakna Yedechem, may you go from strength to strength. The Rosh HaKolel, Shlita, all the Dayanim and the Poiskim, the Bezin, all the Talmidim, and all of the supporters. Mitoich Bracha and Hatzlacha Meruba, Varikoisi Lachem Bracha Ad Blidai. Thank you very much.
This class is brought to you by theyeshiva.net. Please help us continue the classes. Make even a small contribution at www.theyeshiva.net/donate.